All right, everyone, welcome to week 3. This week, we're going to focus on strategy, and we're going to start to talk about exceeding expectations and what that means, from how we target that, how we create a strategy for making that happen, how do we execute on that strategy, how do we use those strategies and turn them into frameworks that export our capabilities and also scale our capabilities beyond the actual work we're doing ourselves and with our teams. And then finally, after that exceeds expectations arc, how do we communicate all that out and use those communications not only to demonstrate what we're capable of as a leader, but also to develop our leadership brand in terms of the method of communication. So just as a reminder, the first 2 weeks, we really focused on motivation and accessibility for ourselves and for our team members, and how those help to create and accomplish the behaviors that we desire in ourselves and others, and how we prompt those situations to happen. Again, going back to the root of everything, it's all about being reliably successful. And that's the pattern that we want to create to achieve the objective that's outlined in this program, which is to build our ability to be more effective leaders and to gain the significant accomplishments that allow us to achieve the types of things that we are looking to achieve. So if you've not looked at the first 2 weeks of the program before coming to this, I strongly suggest that you do so and you invest the time there to understand the foundation of the program. And you're really going to need to have these things in place in order to achieve and implement the strategy to realize the vision and sustain that, and making it more likely that it's going to happen, therefore increasing the probability of success. And when you iterate on that multiple times, you increase the probability that you're actually going to be reliable in achieving success in terms of frequency. All right, so enough of the recap. Let's go ahead and jump right in for week 3. Okay, so what are we going to cover in week 3? It's all about, again, it's this top habit. So it's the top habit number 3 of 6. And this is about providing a framework. We're going to talk about frameworks in week 5. This whole thing is a framework that I'm leveraging to give you value. So things that I put together that you take and use to be successful. And this framework is, let's say you're creating a business plan or something else that relates to that would use a strategy, and you want to implement it, and you can consistently and sustainably deliver exceeded expectations against goals. And exceeding expectations is important because that's kind of the delta of being, okay, doing a good job, Jason. You're doing a remarkable job, Jason, and being able to consistently do that is very important. But there's also an approach of making people think you're targeting meeting expectations, but consistently exceeding expectations. And we'll go a little bit more into that this week. So what are the 5 things that we will cover this week on every day? So today we're going to focus on overall goals for yourself and what that means, how to anticipate the expectations of stakeholders around you, customers, managers, leaders, people that report into you, cross-functionally, working with other leaders and other teams. And then moving from anticipating to understanding those expectations, and over time, closing the gap between anticipating and understanding. So getting just so familiar that when you guess and you anticipate what the expectation will be, is you're likely going to be right, that is the expectation, and it will allow you to expedite your outcomes. And then once you get this information around understanding the expectations, bringing it all together, inclusive of what we talked about in weeks 1 and 2, which is motivation and accessibility. So we want to increase the probability that you're going to exceed expectations. So you're going to need those data points in order to make that happen. So go back to those prior weeks of weeks 1 and 2 if you have not done this, or you will not be maximizing your probability of success in this area. So once we synthesize that information, ultimately identifying like what the targets are, what should we strive for, that's going to create a probability of exceeding expectations. So what are the deliverables for this week? Number one, it's you're going to understand a method for strategy that exceeds expectations. So you can apply this again and again. You can take it, you can modify it, you can adapt it, you can adopt it, whatever, but you can have this foundation in order for this repeated success. And then ultimately an initial strategy. So if you're doing the exercises, you should have somewhat of a kernel of a strategy of something that you're thinking about. And this week's also a little bit of a stretch from an accountability standpoint, so I want to prepare you for that. So far, everything in this program has been completely reliant on ourselves for the information. But once you get to understanding expectations, you really need to flex your consulting muscles, and you're going to have to talk to some people to get some information. And if you don't do that step, I think you're going to have a challenge. So be prepared for that. This week is probably a little bit more intense than the prior weeks, and we're getting into the tactical and the practical, as I like to say. So taking the action and making things happen. So manage your expectations there, and make sure you collect the data here. Like, that is going to be the difference. It's going to be the collection of the data, how it aligns to you, and how you synthesize that information to create the right targets. Remember, in prior weeks, I talked about expectation setting, and I specifically said I'm not talking about which expectations to pick at this point, that we would come back to that in week 3. Now we're coming back to that. So really, really engage here and do the work so that you get the best result. All right, day 1 content, overall goals. What do I mean by this? Is this the smart stuff, specific things? No, this is really more about aspirations. So in week 1, we talked about aspirations, ultimately motivations, accessibility, prompting based upon BJ Fogg's behavioral science framework to drive behaviors. Like, what are we doing this in service of? So from our own point of view, we are doing this in service of becoming the thing that we want to be. Like, be the thing you want to be. What is that role that you want to be? What is that thing that you're aspiring to? So when you're framing your overall goal, what is that thing that you want to become? And sometimes you just don't know, right? Like, you get asked this question when you're 5 years old and somebody wants to be like a fireman or a firewoman, or someone wants to be an astronaut, someone wants to be a musician, some kids want to be an accountant. All good things. But at the end of the day, like, maybe that changes for the person over time. And as you gain more experiences, it helps you to understand and shape that. But some of the things that really help you to understand that are things that we covered in earlier weeks. So looking at sustainable motivation. So the type of motivation that you don't necessarily need to hack yourself to get into, and is present for longer periods of time. And we talked about intrinsic motivation. So when you show up to a role, no matter what role it is, what is the kind of work that when you do it, you are in that flow state. And when your brain like registers an opportunity that this work is possible in this role, you're excited to do. So that can help to inform you in terms of what you're aspiring to become. Your authenticity. So if you're looking at a certain situation and you're afraid of something, or you're trying to protect yourself, in those types of situations where you're doing that behavior and it's stopping you from doing that thing that you're being stopped by from those feelings is probably something that you want to aspire to become. So that's another indicator. Commitment, like things that when you look at, I can commit to this. This is freeing to me, eliminating the other options. If I had this role, if I could perform in this way, that's another indicator. You see, we're leveraging these things from the prior weeks to understand what we want to become. And I just touched upon the freedom component, the next piece. So go back to the prior weeks, look at the motivation pieces and use some of those techniques to understand what you want to aspire to be if you don't necessarily know what that means for yourself. And then on the accessibility side of the equation, this is where skills come into play. And a good exercise here is like, imagine yourself out like 5 or 10 years and somebody's writing the headline about you that defines your professional success. What do you think that headline would be? And then what do you think the milestones would be to get there? And for each of the milestones, what are some of the skills that you think you would have to acquire to achieve those milestones? Things that maybe you don't have, maybe that you already do have. And you could quickly make a list to understand that. Now, from an accessibility and behavioral science standpoint, the accessibility piece, you may look at certain skills, like maybe you're not strong in finance, but you want to be like a C-suite executive, and you're like, how do I can't avoid not knowing about finance and being able to achieve that. So you might look at any type of habits or behaviors you need to establish that involve finance and say, this is really difficult. I don't know. So you may have to lift your motivation to get through that. So what can you tap in to do that? So go through each of these milestones and say to yourself, what do I think the skills are that I would need to acquire to achieve this aspirational headline based upon the role I want to be that would achieve that headline? What are the things that I need to pick up? So you've got the motivation side of the equation, right? The different types of motivations that help to inform you. You've got this kind of like headline approach, and what are the skills that you would need to acquire to get there, and the different milestones, and that measures the accessibility side for you. So use these two components to understand your aspirations. So how does this fit into the daily quantifiable goal kind of stuff? So essentially, this aspiration is your North Star. Like, if every time you make a decision and you're going through a decision framework, and at the end of this program, I'm going to try to do a little extra video to show you this decision frameworks. When you are making a decision, you need to have this factor of your North Star in there. And how does it align? Especially when these decisions could have an outcome on your career. And I'm not just talking about jobs you might pick, but the types of work you want to focus on and the skills that you might develop, the accessibility piece, the types of work that might be motivating for you. This will help you to align. So you may have 10 goals, and let's say that you can choose from, and maybe 6 of them have alignment to that North Star. And you could be very conscious that achieving those 6 can get you to where you want to be with the North Star. And you may still have to do the other 4, or maybe there's ways to delegate that elsewhere and get some benefit as a leader doing that. So this helps you to be very conscious of what to prioritize and what to focus on. So you've got the big aspiration and role that you want to become, informed by your motivations, informed by the accessibility and the skills and the milestones in your headline. And then you have these kind of like tactical and practical goals, these quantifiable things that potential opportunities that you can focus on and picking the right ones. So this will help you to inform that. So I just talked about this. I got ahead of myself on the slides. Let me conclude here then and just say, like please do the accountability exercise for today. I think one of the biggest questions I get in like any kind of career conversation is, or at least that I try to help other people answer, whether it's been from like mentorship or people management, is like looking out a few years ahead. Where do you want to be? And I think it becomes more and more challenging as we get older and older. If we really don't have an answer to this question more than a year out, right? Because the clock's ticking, time is finite. And if there are certain things that you want to achieve in your career, you don't have like that North Star, that direction, it could be honestly be challenging. But for some folks, that's okay, and they're okay with that. So, live your best life, do what's right for you. But I would say if you're an aspiring leader and you're looking to achieve the objectives of part of this program, if you don't have this in place, you could feel a little rudderless. And I'm hoping that looking at the motivations, looking at accessibility and milestones and skills helps you to gain a clearer picture. And also another thing to understand, that thing that you're picking 5-10 years out, if that ultimately is not the right thing that you want to do, I'm going to be really certain that the steps that you took to get there and the skills that you acquired along the way, based upon this point in your career and you're taking this program, are going to be highly transferable and valuable. So I don't think there's a huge risk if you pick the wrong North Star and then you decide to switch it. All right, so I am looking forward to the remainder of this week. Do this accountability exercise, and then we will move on to focusing on the expectations of others and how we bring that all together with some other data points to ultimately set the right targets for exceeding expectations. All right, I will see you the next day.